The people who change your life rarely arrive looking important. Sarah Mitchell would remember those words long after the storm had passed, but on that cold Thursday evening, she was too tired to think about life lessons. She was simply trying to get home. Rain hammered against the windshield of her aging sedan as she drove through the outskirts of town. The wipers struggled to keep up with the downpour, sweeping back and forth in a steady rhythm. Sarah tightened her grip on the steering wheel and glanced at the dashboard clock. It was nearly 7 o'clock. Her shift at the grocery store had ended late because another employee called in sick, leaving Sarah to cover extra responsibilities she could hardly afford to refuse. Every additional hour mattered. Rent was due in less than a week. The electric bill sat unopened on her kitchen counter. Her 9-year-old son, Ethan, was waiting at home with a neighbor who watched him after school whenever Sarah worked late. Like most evenings, guilt followed her through the rain. She wished she could spend more time with him. She wished she could give him more. As she approached a quiet stretch of road near an old bus stop, something caught her attention. At first, she thought it was a sign swaying in the wind. Then the headlights revealed a figure standing alone beneath the shelter. An elderly man. Sarah slowed slightly. The bus stop offered little protection from the storm. Rain blew sideways through the open structure, soaking everything beneath it. The man stood motionless, wearing a dark coat and holding a worn umbrella that seemed almost useless against the weather. Several vehicles passed him without stopping. Sarah watched them continue into the darkness. She told herself to keep driving. After all, she did not know him. It was late. She was exhausted. Ethan was waiting. Yet as she continued down the road, the image stayed with her. In the rearview mirror, she could still see the lonely outline of the old man standing in the rain. Something about it felt wrong. Sarah thought about her own father, who had passed away several years earlier. She imagined him stranded in weather like this, hoping someone might care enough to stop. Before she could talk herself out of it, she eased her foot onto the brake. The car slowed. Then she made a careful turn and headed back toward the bus stop. Rain drummed against the roof as she pulled alongside the shelter. The elderly man looked surprised when her window lowered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Water streamed down the glass and pooled along the pavement. Finally, Sarah offered a small smile. "You should not be standing out here in this weather." The man returned a gentle smile of his own. His face showed the lines of many years, but there was warmth in his eyes. "I have managed worse," he replied. Sarah looked at the empty road ahead and then back at him. Every practical reason told her to continue home. Yet another voice told her something different. Without overthinking it, she unlocked the passenger door and spoke the words that would quietly change both of their lives. "Get in. I will drive you home." The elderly man stepped carefully into the car, his umbrella dripping onto the floor mats as Sarah offered him a reassuring smile. "I do not want to get your coat wet," she said, reaching over to help him adjust. He chuckled softly, a sound that mingled with the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers, and thanked her. As they drove down the slick streets, Sarah found herself stealing glances at him, noticing the quiet dignity in the way he held himself, the subtle grace in the gentle movements of his hands. "It has been quite a storm today," he remarked, his voice calm, yet carrying the weight of years. Sarah nodded, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter, thinking about the small comforts she wanted to offer in that simple gesture of driving him home. For a moment, the world outside seemed distant, the rain creating a protective bubble around the two of them. She realized that this encounter, small and unexpected, was already imprinted in her memory, an echo of kindness in a day filled with fatigue and obligation. The man began to tell her stories of his youth, of adventures and quiet evenings in the city, and Sarah listened, captivated by the way he painted pictures with words, the narratives winding around the mundane details of life to reveal moments of beauty and human connection. She found herself relaxing, the tension from the day melting slightly as she shared space and silence with someone who, for no reason other than circumstance, had stepped into her life. Each turn of the road seemed to match the rhythm of their growing comfort, and she sensed a trust forming in the quiet acknowledgement of shared humanity. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked windshield, casting fleeting reflections across the dashboard, and Sarah realized that she had not expected this, had not anticipated the feeling of being part of someone else's story for even a few minutes. As they approached his neighborhood, she noticed the subtle changes in the street, the familiar storefronts, the way the rain pooled at the curbs, and she felt a mixture of satisfaction and gentle melancholy. He thanked her again as she pulled up to a modest house, its porch light glowing faintly in the rainy evening. "You have a good heart," he said, stepping carefully onto the wet pavement. Sarah smiled, her thoughts racing with questions she did not dare ask, thoughts about the small, profound ways life intersects, how a single choice can ripple quietly into countless unseen outcomes. He waved goodbye, disappearing into the doorway, leaving Sarah sitting in the car, listening to the patter of rain, aware of the extraordinary ordinariness of that moment and the subtle shift in perspective it had given her, a quiet reminder that sometimes helping a stranger can illuminate the depths of one's own humanity and leave traces that linger long after the rain has stopped. As the old man settled into his favorite armchair, Sarah offered him a warm cup of tea, the steam curling upward like a soft invitation to conversation. "You must be tired from the rain," she said, placing the cup carefully on the table. He nodded appreciatively, his eyes reflecting the faint glow of the lamp, and took a slow sip. The room was cozy, filled with the comforting scent of brewed tea and worn books stacked neatly along the shelves. Sarah noticed how small gestures could carry significant meaning, how simply offering a seat and a drink could convey care and attention in ways words sometimes could not. The old man began to recount memories from his youth, speaking with a gentle cadence that made each story feel vivid and alive. Tales of quiet streets and laughter echoing across decades, of friendships that shaped him and moments of reflection that defined his character. Sarah listened intently, realizing how rare it was to encounter such openness, how the act of helping someone in need could lead to an unexpected exchange of wisdom and perspective. She asked questions softly, encouraging him to continue, fascinated by the layers of his experiences and the life lessons subtly interwoven in his recollections. Time seemed to stretch, measured not by the clock but by the shared space and mutual presence, the kind that nurtures empathy and understanding. Occasionally, a soft smile crossed his face as he recalled particular moments, and Sarah felt a warmth that transcended the simplicity of the evening, a sense of connection born from genuine human interaction. Outside, the rain had tapered to a light drizzle, casting silver streaks against the window pane. Yet inside, the room radiated a quiet stability, a small refuge from the storm outside. As the conversation continued, Sarah reflected on how unpredictable life could be, how a single decision to assist someone could unfold into profound, unforeseen experiences, bridging generational gaps and fostering respect and admiration between strangers. She noticed subtle details, the way he gestured with his hands, the soft timbre of his voice, the careful choice of words, and recognized the richness of character that comes from a lifetime of living thoughtfully. The old man paused occasionally, inviting reflection, and Sarah responded with attentive listening, realizing the reciprocal nature of care and presence. Hours passed unnoticed, filled with stories and gentle laughter. The mundane moment transformed into an intimate shared experience that left an indelible impression on her. When the time came for her to leave, she felt a reluctant hesitation, an acknowledgement that these interactions, brief though they may seem, carried the weight of meaningful human connection and the subtle power of kindness to transform ordinary days into moments of lasting significance. She left the cup still half full on the table, a silent testament to the evening shared, stepping back into the evening light with a heart slightly fuller and a mind touched by the narrative threads of another life, a reminder of how simple actions ripple outward in ways we cannot predict. The next morning, Sarah woke before sunrise and prepared breakfast for Ethan while the memories of the previous evening lingered in her mind. She could still hear the old man's calm voice and remember the thoughtful stories he had shared. There had been something unusual about him, not because of anything he said directly, but because of the way he listened. Most people waited for their turn to speak. Henry Lawson seemed genuinely interested in understanding others. As Ethan ate his cereal, Sarah pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the day ahead. Life did not slow down simply because of an unexpected encounter. She dropped Ethan off at school and headed to the grocery store where she worked. The morning passed in a familiar blur of stocking shelves, helping customers, and handling deliveries. By late afternoon, her feet were aching again. During her break, she checked her bank account and felt her stomach tighten. The numbers were lower than she hoped. Rent, utilities, groceries, and school expenses seemed to consume every dollar she earned. Even so, she reminded herself that worrying would not solve anything. She returned to work determined to keep moving forward. That evening, after her shift ended, Sarah found herself thinking about Henry again. She wondered whether he had made it home safely after she dropped him off. The thought surprised her. She rarely had time to think about strangers. Yet something about the old man had stayed with her. As she drove home, she noticed a folded piece of paper resting on the passenger seat. At first, she assumed it was a receipt or grocery list. Then she realized it must have fallen from Henry's coat during the ride. Curious, she pulled into a parking lot and carefully unfolded it. Inside was an old photograph. The image showed a much younger Henry standing beside several people in front of a large building. Everyone was smiling. On the back of the photograph, written in faded blue ink, were the words, "The beginning of something bigger than any of us imagined." Sarah studied the photograph for several moments. The building looked important, perhaps an office or company headquarters, but she could not identify it. The picture raised more questions than answers. Why had Henry carried it with him? Why did it seem so meaningful? She decided she should return it. Back at home, Ethan was working on homework at the kitchen table. Sarah placed the photograph beside her and began preparing dinner. Throughout the evening, she occasionally glanced at it. The faces in the picture appeared proud and hopeful, as though they had just accomplished something significant. Later that night, after Ethan went to bed, Sarah searched through old online articles, hoping to recognize the building. She found nothing. Eventually, she laughed at herself and closed the laptop. It was probably just a personal memory. Still, before turning off the light, she placed the photograph safely inside an envelope. She knew she needed to return it. What Sarah did not realize was that the photograph represented a clue to a much larger story, one that was quietly beginning to connect her future to the man she had helped during a storm. The following week became the most difficult Sarah had faced in years. On Monday morning, employees at the grocery store were called into a meeting before opening. Sarah stood with her co-workers near the customer service desk, sensing tension in the room before a single word was spoken. The store manager explained that declining sales had forced the company to reduce labor hours across several locations. As names and schedules were discussed, Sarah felt a knot tighten in her stomach. By the end of the meeting, her weekly hours had been cut significantly. The reduction might not have seemed dramatic to someone with savings or additional income, but for Sarah, every hour represented groceries, utility payments, and school expenses. Driving home that afternoon, she calculated numbers in her head repeatedly, searching for solutions that never quite added up. When she arrived at the apartment, Ethan greeted her with his usual smile, unaware of the financial storm quietly building around them. Sarah forced herself to smile back. He deserved a childhood free from adult worries. That evening, after Ethan finished his homework, she sat alone at the kitchen table reviewing bills. The rent notice lay beside the electric bill. Her car insurance payment was due soon as well. For the first time in months, genuine fears settled over her. She had always managed to find a way forward, but this situation felt different. Even working harder would not immediately solve the problem because the available hours no longer existed. Over the next several days, Sarah submitted applications everywhere she could think of. She updated her resume, searched online job boards, and contacted local businesses. Most responses never came. A few polite emails informed her that positions had already been filled. Despite the disappointment, she refused to stop trying. Meanwhile, the envelope containing Henry's photograph remained safely stored inside a kitchen drawer. Several times she considered driving to his house to return it, but each day brought another responsibility, demanding her attention. Late Friday afternoon, as Sarah finished stocking shelves, her phone vibrated with an unfamiliar number. Expecting another automated call, she nearly ignored it. Something prompted her to answer. A professional voice introduced herself as a hiring coordinator for a regional company Sarah did not recognize. The woman explained that Sarah's resume had been recommended for consideration regarding an upcoming position involving customer relations and community outreach. Sarah blinked in surprise. She had never applied there. Assuming there had been some mistake, she politely explained as much. The coordinator sounded equally confused. According to her records, Sarah's name had been submitted directly through a personal recommendation. Even more surprising, the company wanted to schedule an interview the following week. After the call ended, Sarah sat silently in her car, trying to understand what had just happened. She knew almost no one with professional influence. Certainly nobody connected to a larger corporation. As rain clouds gathered again across the evening sky, she remembered the old photograph resting inside her drawer and the mysterious words written on its back. For reasons she could not explain, the unexpected opportunity and the forgotten photograph suddenly felt connected. Somewhere beyond her understanding, pieces of a larger puzzle were beginning to move into place. The days leading up to the interview felt unusually long. Sarah prepared as carefully as possible, researching the company, updating her resume once again, and practicing answers to common interview questions after Ethan went to bed each night. Although she appreciated the opportunity, one question continued to occupy her thoughts. Who had recommended her? The hiring coordinator had been clear. Someone specifically requested that her application be reviewed. Sarah could not identify a single person in her life with that kind of professional influence. The mystery followed her into the interview itself. On Tuesday morning, she arrived at a modern office building located downtown. The lobby was bright and welcoming, with large windows overlooking the city. Sarah took a deep breath and reminded herself that regardless of how she received the opportunity, success would depend entirely on her own performance. The interview panel consisted of 3 professionals who immediately put her at ease. Rather than focusing only on technical qualifications, they asked questions about communication, problem-solving, teamwork, and community involvement. To Sarah's surprise, she found herself answering confidently. Years of balancing work, parenting, finances, and daily challenges had taught her skills she rarely gave herself credit for. By the time the interview concluded, she felt something she had not experienced in a long time: genuine optimism. Meanwhile, several miles away, Henry Lawson sat quietly in a private office reviewing reports from various charitable initiatives. A framed copy of the same photograph Sarah had discovered rested on a shelf behind him. The image represented one of the proudest moments of his life. Decades earlier, Henry had helped build a company that eventually grew into one of the most respected organizations in the region. Although he had retired years ago and largely stepped away from public attention, his influence remained significant. When Sarah had stopped her car during the storm, Henry recognized something rare in her almost immediately. Most people were kind when kindness offered a reward. Sarah had been kind when she believed there was nothing to gain. That distinction mattered. Yet even after recommending her name for consideration, Henry had insisted on one condition. She would receive only an opportunity, never special treatment. If she succeeded, it would be because she earned it herself. 3 days after the interview, Sarah received another call. This time, the news left her speechless. She had been offered the position. The salary exceeded anything she had earned before. The benefits would provide stability she had never known. Most importantly, the schedule would allow her to spend more time with Ethan. After ending the call, Sarah sat quietly in her apartment, overwhelmed by gratitude and disbelief. Ethan noticed her expression immediately. "Mom, what happened?" he asked. Sarah smiled through tears of relief and pulled him into a hug. "I got the job." Ethan's excited reaction filled the apartment with laughter for the first time in weeks. Later that evening, after the celebration settled, Sarah opened the kitchen drawer and removed the envelope containing Henry's photograph. Looking at the faded image once more, she felt certain the answer to her mystery somehow began with the old man she had met in the rain. She still did not understand exactly how, but she knew one thing for certain. It was time to return the photograph and finally learn the truth behind the stranger who seemed connected to every unexpected change in her life. Sarah waited until the weekend before driving to Henry Lawson's house. The envelope containing the photograph rested carefully on the passenger seat beside her. During the previous few days, she had started her new position and already noticed how different her life felt. For the first time in years, she was not calculating every dollar before making a simple purchase. The new job came with stability, professional growth, and a schedule that allowed her to spend evenings with Ethan. Yet despite all the positive changes, one unanswered question remained. How had this opportunity found her? As she pulled into Henry's driveway, she noticed the property looked exactly as she remembered. It was comfortable, and well-maintained, but far from extravagant. Nothing about the home suggested extraordinary wealth or influence. Sarah knocked on the door, and a few moments later Henry greeted her with the same warm smile she remembered from the rainy night. "Sarah," he said pleasantly, "I was hoping I might see you again." She handed him the envelope. "You left this in my car." Henry carefully removed the photograph and studied it for several seconds. His expression softened. "I have been looking for this." He invited her inside, and before long they were seated in the living room with coffee and conversation. This time, however, Sarah was determined to find answers. She thanked him for the stories he had shared, and then carefully described the mysterious recommendation that had led to her new position. Henry listened quietly without interrupting. When she finished speaking, he smiled but offered no direct explanation. Instead, he handed her the photograph. "Take a closer look," he said. Sarah examined the image again. This time Henry pointed toward the building in the background. Beneath the company logo, partially obscured by age and fading, she finally recognized a familiar name. Her eyes widened immediately. The company shown in the photograph was connected to the organization that had just hired her. Suddenly, several pieces began falling into place. "You work there?" she asked. Henry nodded. "A long time ago." Sarah looked back at the photograph and then at Henry. "Worked there," she repeated. "Or built it?" Henry laughed softly. The answer told her everything she needed to know. For a moment, she simply stared at him. The humble man she had picked up in the rain was not merely a retired employee. He had been one of the founders responsible for creating a company that now employed thousands of people across the country. Sarah struggled to reconcile that reality with the man sitting comfortably across from her. Henry noticed her surprise. "Most people only see titles and accomplishments," he said. "I prefer seeing character." Then he explained why he had recommended her name. Not because she had given him a ride. Not because he felt sorry for her circumstances. He had recommended her because she demonstrated kindness when she believed there would be no reward. That quality, he said, was becoming increasingly rare. As Sarah drove home later that afternoon, she replayed the conversation repeatedly in her mind. The mystery was finally becoming clear. Yet she sensed the story was not finished. Henry had revealed who he was, but she had a feeling there was still one final lesson he intended for her to discover. Over the next several months, Sarah settled into her new role and quickly exceeded expectations. The position challenged her in ways she had never experienced before. Instead of stocking shelves and rushing through long shifts, she now spent her days helping customers, coordinating community projects, and working alongside professionals who respected her ideas. For the first time in her adult life, she felt seen for her abilities rather than limited by her circumstances. The changes at home were equally meaningful. Ethan noticed them immediately. His mother smiled more often. The constant stress that once followed her through every day slowly began to fade. They no longer spent evenings worrying about overdue bills or unexpected expenses. Instead, they talked about school, future plans, and simple family activities they had rarely been able to enjoy before. Yet despite all the positive developments, Sarah never forgot the lesson that had started everything. Whenever she faced a difficult decision, she remembered the rainy evening when she chose to stop for a stranger. One afternoon, Sarah received an invitation to attend a community leadership event sponsored by the company. Employees, local business leaders, and community partners would gather to celebrate projects that had made a positive impact throughout the region. Sarah was surprised to learn that she had been selected to receive recognition for her work. Although honored, she felt uncomfortable with the attention. Recognition had never been her goal. Nevertheless, she agreed to attend. On the evening of the event, she entered a large conference hall filled with hundreds of guests. Ethan accompanied her, dressed proudly in his best clothes. As they found their seats, Sarah noticed Henry sitting near the front of the room. He smiled warmly and gave a small wave. Seeing him there immediately made her feel more relaxed. Throughout the evening, speakers discussed leadership, service, and the importance of investing in people. Then the program reached its final segment. The host announced a special recognition for individuals whose actions demonstrated extraordinary character. Sarah listened politely, assuming the award would go to a well-known executive or community leader. Instead, the speaker began describing a rainy evening many months earlier. The audience grew quiet as the story unfolded. An exhausted single mother had stopped her car to help an elderly stranger standing alone in a storm. She expected nothing in return. She simply chose kindness because it felt like the right thing to do. Sarah immediately realized what was happening. Her heart began racing. The speaker then invited Henry to the stage. Standing before the audience, he explained that countless people had passed him that night. Only one person stopped. He described how Sarah's compassion reflected the exact values he believed communities needed most. Then he revealed publicly for the first time that he had recommended her for the opportunity that transformed her career. The room erupted into applause. Sarah felt overwhelmed, not because of the recognition, but because she finally understood the full impact of one simple decision. Looking around the room, she saw people inspired not by wealth, status, or success, but by an act of kindness anyone could choose. As the applause continued, Henry looked directly at Sarah and smiled. Yet even in that powerful moment, she sensed his most important lesson had not been spoken from the stage. It was something far deeper, something she would fully understand very soon. 1 year later, Sarah stood outside a newly opened community resource center watching families arrive for a weekend event. Children ran across the lawn while parents gathered near information booths offering educational programs, job resources, and mentoring opportunities. The center had become one of the company's most successful community projects, and Sarah had played a major role in helping bring it to life. Looking around at the smiling faces, she felt grateful for how much had changed. Not because her life had become easier, but because she finally had the chance to create opportunities for others the way someone had once created an opportunity for her. Ethan, now a little older and noticeably taller, volunteered nearby, helping younger children register for activities. Sarah watched him interact with patience and kindness, and a quiet sense of pride filled her heart. The values she worked so hard to teach were becoming part of the young man he was growing into. Later that afternoon, Henry arrived at the center. Despite his accomplishments and influence, he still preferred simple clothes and avoided unnecessary attention. Most people attending the event had no idea who he was. To them, he was simply an elderly man enjoying the community gathering. Sarah greeted him warmly and thanked him again for coming. Henry smiled. "I think I should be thanking you." Sarah laughed softly. "For what?" Henry looked around at the families, volunteers, and staff members working together. "For proving that character still matters." As the event continued, the two of them found a quiet bench overlooking the activity. The scene reminded Sarah of another bench, another rainy day, and another moment when a simple decision changed everything. After several minutes of comfortable silence, Henry shared the lesson he had wanted her to understand all along. He explained that many people believed success came from intelligence, luck, wealth, or connections. While those things could be helpful, he believed something else mattered even more. Character determined what people did when there was no audience and no reward. Character shaped every decision, every relationship, and every opportunity that followed. Sarah listened carefully because she knew he was speaking from experience. Then Henry surprised her with one final confession. The night of the storm had not been entirely accidental. His car had broken down, but he had also chosen not to call for immediate assistance. He occasionally spent time in ordinary places because he believed it helped him stay connected to real people and real life. What he never expected was to meet someone like Sarah. Not because she offered a ride, but because she did so without hesitation or expectation. As the sun began setting, Ethan joined them on the bench. Looking at the two people who had quietly shaped his future, he asked what started their friendship. Sarah smiled and glanced toward Henry. Then she answered with complete honesty. "A small choice." Ethan seemed puzzled. Sarah continued. "Most people think life changes because of big moments. Sometimes it changes because of small moments when you choose kindness." Henry nodded in agreement. Together they watched the final guests leave the event. The evening air felt calm and peaceful. Sarah thought back to the exhausted woman driving home through a storm 1 year earlier. She could never have imagined where that road would lead. Yet the lesson remained beautifully simple. The greatest opportunities often begin with ordinary acts of kindness, and the people whose lives we change may end up changing ours as well.